Welcome to the Nourish to Thrive podcast, faith-forward, science-backed strategies for women who want more energy, less weight, and real answers. I'm your host, Tanya Pennington-Miller, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and functional blood chemistry specialist with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. If you're tired of feeling dismissed by your doctor, confused by your labs, and stuck in survival mode, you're in the right place. Here, we simplify the science. We get to the root, and we anchor it all in truth, because God made your body to heal and thrive, not just survive. It just needs the right kind of support and less noise. Hello, my friend. Welcome into the Nourish to Thrive podcast. I am so glad you're back with me today. Today, we are starting a brand new series here on the show called What Your Body is Trying to Tell You. So in this series, we are going to take some of the most common symptoms that women experience, and we're going to walk through what may actually be happening beneath the surface physiologically, because many of the things women experience in midlife are really just a check engine light. And when you start learning how to look under the hood, your body begins to make a lot more sense. So today we're going to start with one of the most common things I hear from women starting really in their late 30s, okay? And that is waking up at 3 a.m. So maybe you fall asleep just fine, but somewhere between like 2 and 4 in the morning, your eyes open and suddenly you're wide awake. Sometimes your mind starts racing. Sometimes you might feel a little bit anxious. Sometimes you're just simply awake. And the frustrating part is, even if you're able to get yourself back to sleep after some time, you wake up the next morning feeling like you never fully rested. So I want to talk about what might actually be happening there, okay? And first, it's important to understand that our bodies run on a 24-hour circadian rhythm. Hormones rise and fall throughout the day in a very predictable pattern. And at night, there are a few important things that are supposed to happen. Okay, one thing is melatonin should rise in order to support our sleep. Cortisol should stay very, very low. Blood sugar should remain very stable. And all of this should happen because the body shifts into this repair, recovery, and detoxification mode. And for most of the night, your nervous system should really be operating in a deeper restorative state. Okay. Now, around maybe 3 to 4 a.m., your body is also starting to prepare to eventually wake up. Because of this, cortisol begins to slowly rise at this time, just a little bit. Okay. And your body temp actually begins to increase just a tad too. Okay. This is all in anticipation of the morning for you to wake up. Now, when your system is stable, you actually are able to stay asleep through that process. But when it's not, this transition period is often where your sleep becomes interrupted. So I want to talk about the reasons why we might be waking up at 3 a.m. every morning, when really we would prefer to be sleeping, okay? One of the most common reasons, I'm going to start with reason number one. One of the most common reasons that women wake up around 3 a.m. is blood sugar instability. Your brain requires a steady supply of glucose overnight in order to keep the nervous system stable while you're sleeping. But if your blood sugar drops too low during the nighttime, the body has to step in and bring it back up. And the body can do this. We are designed to be able to increase our blood glucose without us actually eating anything, okay? But the way that it does this is by releasing stress hormones, and this includes cortisol and adrenaline. Those hormones do exactly what they're designed to do. They're going to raise your blood sugar, but they're also designed to signal the body to become alert. So now, instead of staying in that deeper restorative sleep where we should be, our nervous system is suddenly shifting into this more wakeful state. And that's usually the moment when your eyes open, you find yourself staring at the ceiling, staring at the clock, it's 3 a.m., This pattern is especially common in women who are doing many of the things that they've been told are healthy. Okay. Women who are under eating during the day, maybe eating a very low carbohydrate diet for long periods of time. Maybe they are pushing fasting longer than their body can comfortably support in the season that they are in. Maybe they're going to bed after too long of a stretch without food for the season they are in, or they're just already carrying a higher overall stress load. And over time, those patterns can make it harder for the body to keep blood sugar steady overnight. And when that stability drops during sleep, the body uses stress hormones to bring it back up. I mean, it's actually a beautiful design. It's for our survival, okay? Now, when that happens, that does solve the blood sugar problem, which is great because we're able to stay alive, okay? But this is often at the expense of our sleep. So how do you know if blood sugar might be behind your 3 a.m. wake-ups that you're experiencing? There's a few patterns I often see with women when blood sugar is part of the picture. One is that they wake up like very suddenly, like you're asleep and then your eyes pop open and you're wide awake. And sometimes maybe your mind starts racing. Sometimes your heart feels like it's beating a little bit faster. Another clue is this, and you can try this for yourself. If you tend to feel better after you eat a little something. Some women will notice that if they have just a really small snack, like a little, maybe like protein or fat or a little combination of the two, they're able to fall back to sleep very quickly. And interestingly enough, this actually happened to me when I was pregnant with our daughter. Pregnancy can make blood sugar regulation just more sensitive overall for some women. I was one of them. So when I started waking up in the middle of the night, I knew that was likely part of what was happening. So what I ended up doing is I would keep a small piece of a keto brick. And if you haven't heard of what that is, I would keep a little piece of it on my nightstand. And really, it's mostly fat with a little bit of protein. And I would just take like 2 or 3 small bites and I would usually fall right back to sleep. So for me, I knew that my 3 a.m. wake-ups did have to do with blood sugar instability. Another pattern that I often see is that these same women tend to experience feelings like afternoon energy crashes, maybe feeling shaky or irritable when they go too long without eating, strong cravings later in the day, or just feeling like they have to rely on caffeine to get through the afternoon. Okay, all of these things can be signs that blood sugar regulation needs a little more support. Number 2 is, and this is another real common driver of early morning wake-ups, is cortisol rhythm disruption. Okay, that is not necessarily due to blood sugar dysregulation. Okay, cortisol follows a very specific daily pattern in the body. It's supposed to be the highest at rise. It should lower a bit by late morning. It should lower even more by early evening. And it's the lowest in the late night, okay, when your body is resting and repairing. And then it gradually rises again in the early morning hours to wake you up and to get you going for the day. And I know that we often hear about cortisol being bad, but that morning rise in cortisol is actually a very normal and very healthy part of your circadian rhythm. But when the nervous system has been under sustained stress for long periods of time, that rhythm can start to shift. And instead of cortisol rising mostly in the morning, the body might begin to release it real late at night or in like the wee hours of the early morning, right? Like too early. And this is, for those of you who might feel like you get that second wind, like at 10 o'clock at night, this might be what's happening is your cortisol rhythm is off. Your diurnal rhythm is off. And a lot of times if we have that elevated cortisol in the evening, usually it's too blunted in the mornings. Okay. And this is part of why it's so great to wear the light therapy glasses that I talk about first thing in the morning when you wake up. If you're waking up real tired, real groggy, a lot of times we know that cortisol is probably a little bit too low. So when we put those light therapy glasses on for about 20 to 30 minutes, it helps to increase that cortisol first thing so that we can start to correct that diurnal rhythm. Okay. I'll link it again in the show notes if you want to take a look at it and give you a 15% off code for them as well. So because cortisol is a stimulating hormone, the release of it is going to wake you up. And that's why women who are carrying this higher overall stress load often will describe their sleep as being able to fall asleep without too much trouble, but they're waking up just way too early. Sometimes they're able to drift back to sleep after a while, but other times their mind is just like turning on and it becomes really difficult to settle back down again. And when that pattern repeats night after night, it starts to leave you feeling like you never are quite fully rested, even if you technically, got enough hours in bed. So how do you know if cortisol might be behind your 3 a.m. wake-ups? And there's a few patterns that I often see here when cortisol rhythm is part of the picture. And one is that when you do wake up, your mind immediately turns on. Like instead of simply lying there awake, you suddenly find yourself thinking about the day ahead, running through your to-do lists, replaying conversations, thinking about responsibilities. Another clue is if you tend to feel tired, but wired when this happens. Like your body feels exhausted, but your nervous system doesn't feel like it can fully settle. And you might simply be carrying a lot of sustained load for a long time. This can look like work demands, family responsibilities, sleep disruption, trying to keep everything moving for everyone around you. And over time, the nervous system can begin to hold that load in a way that starts to show up in sleep patterns like this. And of course, now you enter that cycle, right? Number 3, there's one more pattern that often contributes to these early morning wake-ups, and it has to do with something called nervous system hypervigilance, or what we would call higher sympathetic tone. And those are, of course, clinical terms that simply describe a nervous system that's spending more time in alert mode than it is in rest and recovery mode. So your nervous system has 2 primary gears. One is rest and repair. Okay, this is where the body can settle, it can recover, it can move into deeper sleep. This is our parasympathetic state. The other side is the alert side. This is designed to help you respond to stress, to pressure, to danger. This is our sympathetic state. And that alert response is incredibly helpful when we need it. I mean, again, it's a survival state, okay? But when the nervous system spends too much time in that state, it can become harder for the body to stay in that deep restorative sleep through the night. And that's something that I see quite a bit with women in midlife. It's just when there's simply too much being carried. And these women often have a fairly low HRV, which if you wear any type of tracker watch, it will let you know a lot of times what your HRV is. And these women generally tend to have a lower HRV. You're carrying work, family, children, aging parents, households, responsibilities. I mean, there's just a lot. And even when the body finally does get into bed, your nervous system might still be holding that sense of like being on call. Okay. So the body falls asleep, but your system really never fully settles. And when the nervous system is sitting closer to that alert state, it doesn't take much to bring you back to wakefulness. Like it can be a small shift in blood sugar, a small cortisol pulse, a sound in your home, right? A snoring spouse, even if it's a light snore, even a thought that suddenly turns on. I know when I was going through this years ago, just the quietest snore from my husband, I would wake him up and I'd say, "You're snoring." And I would think, gosh, why is this bothering me now, but it never bothered me before? Well, it's not that he had changed, but it was so much easier for me to be woken up because I was never really entering that deep state of sleep. So this is why so many women describe waking up at 3:00 in the morning with their mind just immediately starting to run. Like the body feels tired, but the nervous system is on guard. So how do you know if your nervous system hypervigilance might be a part of the picture? And the truth here is that these symptoms actually look very similar to the cortisol pattern that we just talked about. And this can be why it's tough sometimes to really know, why am I waking up at 3 a.m.? Now, of course, lab testing is something that can help to give us these answers. But if we're not doing lab testing, we really have to think deep on these symptoms. Okay. And the nervous system and cortisol are so closely connected, right? When the nervous system is sitting in that more alert state, it often drives those cortisol signals as well. So many of the patterns women notice can really overlap. For example, when you wake up, your mind might turn on immediately. Instead of simply being awake for a moment, you suddenly find yourself thinking about the day ahead, right? Even the days behind you. You're just thinking about everything. And often when we step back and look at the bigger picture, these women have simply been carrying a lot of sustained responsibility for a long time. They are used to being the ones who keep everything moving. And over time, the nervous system can begin holding that sense of being on call even during sleep. When the system is sitting closer to that alert state, it doesn't take much to bring someone back to wakefulness, okay? And this happens a lot of times with moms, right? Like we have kids, it's innate in us to listen for any and every sound that might happen because we are on call for our kids. And scripture tells us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that means the body was created with intention. The rhythms that we see in the body are sleep cycles, hormone patterns, the way the nervous system responds to stress. It all reflects a kind of order that was built into us. God designed the body to communicate. It gives signals when something in our environment shifts. It gives signals when it needs more support. And sometimes it gives signals when we've simply been carrying more than the system is able to sustain. And sleep disruption is often one of those signals. So it's really an invitation to pay attention. And while culture often encourages us to push through the exhaustion, to override the signals, to consume more caffeine, to keep performing no matter what the body is telling us, it's important that we slow down long enough to listen so that we start to realize the body is actually trying to guide us back toward balance, back toward rhythms that support life. And learning how to recognize those signals is part of stewarding our bodies well. So if you're someone who regularly wakes up around 3 a.m., I want to give you a few places you can start. Okay, number one is making sure that you are stabilizing your blood sugar during the day. So start by making sure that your meals contain adequate protein and healthy fats, okay? Because these nutrients are going to help slow the release of glucose into the bloodstream, and that's going to make it easier for the body to maintain steady blood sugar throughout the day and into the night. And it's also important to avoid long stretches of undereating, especially if you're already dealing with sleep disruption. When the body doesn't have enough fuel coming in during the day, it's much more likely to struggle to maintain stable blood sugar while you're sleeping. Number two, I want you to be thoughtful about fasting. You know I'm a fan, okay? Fasting can be incredibly helpful when it's used in the right season. But if the body is already under a fair amount of stress or if sleep is becoming disrupted, pushing fasting longer or more aggressively can sometimes add more strain than the system can comfortably support. So if you're waking up regularly during the night, it might be helpful to temporarily shorten your fasting window or make sure that your evening meal is, sufficiently nourishing. I often don't recommend a longer fast for women who are in this place more than 1 day per week. Okay, can you do longer fasting more than 1 day per week if you're sleeping well and everything is in place? Absolutely. Okay, but I'm speaking right now to those who are having trouble with those 3 a.m. wake ups. Okay, number three, support your nervous system in the evening. So our nervous system responds very strongly to light, to stimulation, to activity levels. In the evening, small shifts can help signal to the body that it's time to start winding down. So reducing bright light and screens later in the evening, creating a slower bedtime routine, giving your mind some space to settle before sleep, those things can all help the nervous system transition more easily into that deeper restorative state. And number 4, pay attention to your overall stress load. Okay, it's important to remember that the body responds to the total load it's carrying. Food matters, sleep habits matter, but so do things like mental load, responsibilities, and just really your pace of daily life. Sometimes the most supportive shift is simply recognizing that the body might need more recovery than it did in earlier seasons of life. We can't always remove stress from our lives, but we can turn the focus to making sure we're getting enough recovery for the stress load that we do have. So if waking up around 3 a.m. has been part of your experience, know that it is a signal. It's the body letting you know that something in the system needs a little more support, whether that's blood sugar stability, nervous system regulation, or the overall load the body has been carrying. And when you start understanding what the body might be communicating, the conversation can begin to shift. And instead of feeling frustrated with your body, you can start getting curious about what it might be responding to. That shift alone makes a huge difference because once you understand the signals, you can begin supporting your body in a much more thoughtful and intentional way. And that's exactly what this series is going to be about, learning how to recognize the signals your body is sending and understanding what they may be pointing to beneath the surface. So next week in this series, we're going to talk about another sleep pattern that many women experience, okay? Being completely exhausted at the end of the day, but struggling to actually fall asleep. Because if waking up at 3 a.m. is one signal the body sends, difficulty falling asleep is another. And it's often pointing to a different set of physiological shifts. So we are going to unpack what may be happening there as well. So thank you for spending this time with me today, and I will see you right back here next week, sister. That's it for today on the Nourish to Thrive podcast. If you found value here, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or send it to someone who's walking a similar path. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and know that healing is possible, especially when you trust the one who designed your body to heal. Until next time, stay rooted in truth and nourished in grace.